In 1969, a bright young woman with a promising future was found dead in her apartment. Jane Britton, a Harvard graduate student, had made significant strides in the field of archaeology. Her tragic murder would go unsolved for decades. What happened on that cold January night? A case that would capture national attention, unravel the dark secrets of an unsolved mystery, and ultimately bring justice decades later. This is the story of Jane Britton's life, her murder, and the relentless pursuit of truth. Jane Britton was born on May 17, 1945, into a family deeply rooted in academia. Her father, J. Boyd Britton, served as the administrative vice president of Radcliffe College, an institution affiliated with Harvard University. Her mother, Ruth, was a visiting scholar in medieval history at the Radcliffe Institute for Advanced Study. Growing up in Needham, Massachusetts, Jane was immersed in a scholarly environment. She was a bright student, excelling both academically and in extracurricular activities. She attended Dana Hall School, a prestigious private school in Wellesley, where she was known for her talents in horseback riding, playing the piano, and painting. Upon graduation, Jane continued her education at Radcliffe College, where she majored in anthropology. Her academic prowess was evident when she graduated magna cum laude in 1967. Jane's passion for archaeology led her to Harvard University's graduate program, where she further honed her expertise in Near Eastern archaeology. In mid-1968, Jane participated in an archaeological excavation in southeastern Iran alongside prominent archaeologists. This expedition, led by Stephen Williams and C.C. Lambug-Karlofsky, uncovered the ruins of what was believed to be Alexandria Carmania, a fortress built by Alexander the Great. Jane's contribution to this discovery was significant, earning her recognition. Living in Cambridge, Jane was a promising student with a future filled with potential in the field of archaeology. Her academic dedication and passion were evident, and she had just begun her journey toward a remarkable career when her life was tragically cut short. On the night of January 6, 1969, Jane Britton's life took a fateful turn. The evening began with her attending dinner with her anthropology classmates, a regular social gathering among the close-knit academic group. Afterward, Jane joined her boyfriend, James Humphreys, for an ice skating session at Cambridge Common. It was a moment of relaxation, following the stressful start of the semester, before the looming general exams that would determine the next stage of her academic career. At around 10:30 p.m., Jane returned to her apartment. James left shortly after, at 11:30 p.m., after spending some time with her. Jane's night continued with a visit to her neighbors, Don and Jill Mitchell, where the three enjoyed a glass of sherry together. It was a peaceful and uneventful gathering, marking the end of a routine evening. Jane left their apartment around 12:30 a.m., presumably to get some rest before her important exams the following day. What was a seemingly ordinary evening for Jane would be the last time she was seen alive by her friends. The following morning, January 7th, Jane missed her exams, a highly unusual occurrence for someone so dedicated to her studies. When repeated phone calls went unanswered, her boyfriend James, growing increasingly concerned, went to her apartment. What he found would change everything, the beginning of a tragedy that no one could have foreseen. At her building, he found the door unlocked, which seemed odd. James entered, still hoping that Jane might simply be unwell or asleep. However, as he stepped inside, the atmosphere immediately struck him as unsettling. When he walked into Jane's bedroom, he saw her lying face down on the bed. At first glance, she appeared to be simply resting, but her nightgown was oddly pulled up, and there was a rug and a fur coat covering her head. Assuming she might be ill, James did not immediately assume the worst. He left the apartment and called on the Mitchells, his neighbors, to check on Jane. Jill Mitchell, upon seeing the situation firsthand, quickly realized something was terribly wrong. In a state of shock, Don Mitchell entered the room and confirmed the horrifying truth: Jane was dead. Alarmed, James immediately called the police, and the investigation into Jane Britton's tragic death began. The discovery of Jane Britton's body on January 7, 1969, set off an immediate and thorough investigation by the Cambridge police. Upon their arrival, the officers began to search her apartment for evidence. What they found was both disturbing and perplexing. Jane's body showed signs of blunt force trauma to the head, with multiple lacerations and skull fractures, indicating a violent attack. The initial autopsy revealed that Jane had been killed by blunt force trauma, likely caused by a sharp-edged weapon, possibly something like a hatchet or small pickhammer. Despite the gruesome nature of the crime, investigators found little in the apartment to suggest a motive. No valuables had been taken, and nothing seemed out of place, which led them to rule out robbery as a motive. The apartment itself, however, was poorly secured. Jane's door had a faulty lock that she rarely used, and there were no signs of forced entry. Given the building's state of disrepair and lack of proper security, it was easy for someone to slip in unnoticed. Forensic evidence, though initially promising, failed to yield any immediate suspects. A set of fingerprints was found at the scene, but these did not match Jane's or anyone known to the police. Investigators speculated that the weapon used in the crime could have been a 4-by-6-inch stone Jane had brought back from an archaeological dig in Iran. However, this stone was missing, and a search of the apartment turned up no weapons. The lack of clear evidence left investigators with little to go on, and the case soon grew cold. As weeks passed, the police struggled to identify any viable suspects, and the investigation faced mounting frustration. The autopsy and the preliminary findings, though thorough, left more questions than answers. The brutal murder of Jane Britton quickly captured national media attention, primarily due to her association with Harvard University and her family's academic prominence. Jane's father, J. Boyd Britton, was an administrator at Radcliffe College, and her mother, Ruth, was a visiting scholar at the Radcliffe Institute for Advanced Study. The high-profile nature of the case brought increased scrutiny, and the media began to explore various theories surrounding the murder. One aspect of the case that garnered significant attention was the presence of red ochre powder scattered around Jane's body and in her apartment. Red ochre, a reddish-brown powder, had been used by many ancient cultures in funerary rites, often sprinkled on the dead as part of rituals. This led to speculation that Jane's murder might have involved a ritualistic element, suggesting that the killer may have had knowledge of anthropology or archaeology. Given Jane's background in archaeology and her connections with fellow students and faculty in the field, some theorized that the murderer could have been someone from her academic circle, perhaps even a colleague or peer. This theory, however, was soon dismissed by experts. Professor C.C. Lamberg-Kolofsky, who had worked closely with Jane during her time in Iran, described the idea as unfounded and speculative. The media frenzy surrounding the red ochre and the potential ritualistic aspect of the crime only added to the public's fascination with the case. As journalists and the public fixated on these theories, the investigation continued, but the true circumstances behind Jane's death remained elusive. The media's focus on the case, fueled by rumors and wild speculation, only amplified the sense of mystery surrounding Jane's tragic death, but it also brought public pressure on law enforcement to solve the crime. As the months and years passed following Jane Britton's murder, the investigation gradually stalled. Despite an initial flurry of activity, leads quickly dried up, and the case became increasingly difficult to solve. The Cambridge Police and Middlesex County District Attorney's Office exhausted their resources, and with no new significant evidence emerging, Jane's murder eventually became one of the many unsolved cases that fade into the background. Despite this, the case was never officially closed, and the hope that one day justice might be served remained in the minds of those who had known Jane and followed the case. In the years that followed, technological advancements in forensic science, particularly DNA testing, renewed hopes of solving cold cases. In the late 1980s, investigators preserved a sample of semen found at the crime scene. However, it wasn't until the late 2000s that the use of DNA analysis could be applied to the case. When the DNA evidence was first tested, it failed to produce any match with known offenders. A retest was conducted in 2006, but this too failed to yield a breakthrough. It wasn't until 2017 that significant progress was made. With the advancement of DNA technology and forensic methods, investigators were able to conduct a more thorough YSTR analysis. This process specifically targets male DNA and allows for more accurate identification. The new analysis produced a soft hit in the federal CODIS database, leading to the identification of a potential suspect. This breakthrough, which had eluded investigators for decades, was the spark that would ultimately lead to solving the mystery of Jane Britton's death. The case, once thought to be unsolvable, was now on the verge of being cracked wide open. In November 2018, nearly 50 years after Jane Britton's murder, the Middlesex County District Attorney's Office made a groundbreaking announcement. DNA evidence had finally identified the man responsible for her death. Michael Sumter, a convicted rapist and murderer, was named as the perpetrator. Sumter had died in 2001, following a lengthy prison sentence, but the DNA match confirmed his involvement in Jane's murder. His identification brought an unexpected closure to the case, providing answers that had long eluded investigators. Sumter's criminal history was a significant part of the investigation. He had been convicted of multiple rapes and murders throughout the 1970s, with his DNA matching evidence from several unsolved cases in the Boston area. While he had ties to Cambridge, he had lived there as a child and later worked near Jane's apartment. The connection to Jane's case was not immediately obvious. Investigators speculated that Sumter had stalked Jane, following her home from her visit to the Mitchells' apartment. The fire escape, which provided access to Jane's apartment, was believed to be the point of entry, as suggested by witness accounts. Despite the media attention on the red ochre found at the crime scene, which had initially led to speculation about a ritualistic killing, the investigation ultimately dismissed it as a red herring. The focus shifted to Sumter's past and his ties to the area, which included a connection to the neighborhood where Jane lived. The breakthrough came when a familial DNA match linked Sumter to the crime, corroborating witness descriptions of the suspect's height and weight. Investigators pieced together a timeline that suggested Sumter entered Jane's apartment after James Humphreys had left, committing the crime before fleeing the scene. Though Michael Sumter could not stand trial due to his death, his posthumous identification marked the end of an agonizing search for the truth, finally providing closure for Jane's family, friends, and the community. The case would go down in history as the oldest cold case solved in Middlesex County. The resolution of Jane Britton's murder, after nearly 5 decades, brought a sense of closure to her family, friends, and the many who had followed the case over the years. For those who knew her, Jane's tragic death had been a devastating loss, but the identification of Michael Sumter as the perpetrator, through groundbreaking DNA analysis, provided long-awaited answers. It also allowed those closest to her to reflect on her life, a promising young scholar whose potential was tragically cut short. While the identification of Sumter brought justice for Jane, the case also raised critical questions about the handling of cold cases. The investigation into Jane's murder, though thorough at the time, faced numerous challenges, including outdated forensic techniques and a lack of significant leads. Yet, with the advancements in DNA technology, what was once an unsolvable case was ultimately resolved. The impact of this case also extended beyond the Britton family. It underscored the importance of persistence, both from law enforcement and the public. Journalists and individuals like Becky Cooper and Michael Widmer, who championed the cause, played a crucial role in keeping the investigation alive and pushing for the release of information that could lead to a resolution. Their efforts demonstrate how public pressure and technological advancements can work together to bring justice in cases that might otherwise remain unsolved. Though Jane's murder has been resolved, there remain loose ends, such as the unsolved murder of Ada Bean, which some believe may be linked to Sumter. Nevertheless, the resolution of Jane's case marks an important milestone in the pursuit of justice and serves as a reminder that even the coldest of cases can find their resolution, given time and persistence. The resolution of Jane Britton's murder, nearly 50 years later, left a lasting impact on both criminal investigations and the lives of those who knew her. Her case highlighted the power of perseverance in seeking justice, demonstrating that even the most challenging cold cases can be solved with modern technology and relentless determination. The case drew attention to the limitations of 1960s investigative methods and the advancements in forensic science that have since revolutionized criminal investigations. DNA analysis, which was crucial in solving Jane's case, has become a vital tool in solving crimes worldwide. Jane's story serves as a reminder of the importance of revisiting cold cases with new technologies, as justice can still be achieved, no matter how long it takes. Her case also brought attention to the need for law enforcement to preserve evidence and approach unsolved cases with renewed focus. The eventual identification of her killer showed that public persistence, especially from journalists and researchers like Becky Cooper and Michael Widmer, plays an important role in keeping cases alive and pushing for answers. The resolution of Jane's murder gave closure to her family and friends after decades of uncertainty. It underscored that, while some questions remain, the pursuit of justice, no matter how long it takes, can still bring peace to those affected by tragedy.